So I want to welcome everyone to our virtual outing this evening. Uh, this is the second Tuesday of the month virtual outing. That's typically when we hold it. And tonight uh, we have Harvey Leake, who will present Quentin Roosevelt's Grand Canyon Adventures. Uh, I met Harvey at the symposium a couple years ago where he gave a shortened version of this talk. It was a uh, wonderful talk, and looking forward to the expanded version for sure. A little bit about the Grand Canyon Historical Society. The mission statement is to celebrate and promote the study and preservation of the Grand Canyon region's cultural and natural history for the education and enjoyment of its members and the public. We had a 40th anniversary last year, and there was an excellent article in the summer 2024 issue of the Old Pioneer magazine about the history and formation of the society, and that's written by several previous presidents. My name is Tom Sulpizio, if you don't know me, and I'm the president of the society this year. So we are an all-volunteer organization, and we do encourage everyone that attends these virtual outings to be so kind as to consider being a member. It's just a nominal $35 a year, which we put, since we're all volunteer, all of that money goes to our various activities and programs and causes that we sponsor. Uh, we have different research grants. We have awards. We have different award ceremonies that the members can attend. And this membership link is at our website. We actually have the membership location in 3 places, so it's easier for people to find. There was some questions, and we've actually been in the midst of redesigning our website thanks to our webmasters, new board members, Alan Peterson and Davy Crockett. So we're getting the website more user-friendly. The Old Pioneer magazine is included with the membership. There's 4 issues per year, although I show 5 here. The latest issue just appeared. See if I can get, yeah, there we are. So this is the latest issue, and this is the print copy. I'm going to do a little plug here. The president's letter goes into the mission statement beyond. It goes into all of our programs. So there's a whole page summary of what we do, and would appreciate if you got picked up a copy of that magazine. If you're not a member, we become a member, we'll get you a copy. So the virtual outings, this is a chance for us to, well, let me just say that virtual outings, physical outings, tours, and Grand Canyon history can be found at our website and Facebook pages. We try to announce all outings at the website, but more currently and more contemporaneously, it would be at the Facebook page. So tonight's talk and previous talks, which are recorded, are all online. They're all accessible online. Little coming attraction here for our next speaker. As I mentioned, Alan Peterson is a new board member. He's a fine arts curator, author, and historian. He'll present his signature work of the symposium a year and a half ago about Gunnar Vidfors, the master of the inner canyon. I'll let you read the abstract there, but it's about one of the great artists of the canyon, who was a Swedish artist. Alan himself he worked at the South Rim for 3 years before moving to Flagstaff in 1980 to attend NAU, where he earned degrees in painting and art history. He recently retired from a faculty position at Coconino Community College in Flagstaff, where he taught art history, drawing, painting, and courses pertaining to the Colorado Plateau for 30 years. Alan is currently the curator of fine arts for the Museum of Northern Arizona, also in Flagstaff. Now for tonight, Quentin Roosevelt's Grand Canyon Adventures. So on July 13, 1913, 15-year-old Quentin Roosevelt peered into the depths of the Grand Canyon for his first time. He and his compatriots had just arrived by train at the South Rim, and they lost no time making their way to the edge to gaze into the awesome chasm. Leading the group was Quentin's father, Colonel Theodore Roosevelt, who called the view the most wonderful scenery in the world. Also on the team were Quentin's brother, older brother, Archie, and his second cousin, Nicholas. The Roosevelts then worked their way into the canyon's very depths, crossing the Colorado River on the tramway and up the other side, just the beginning of a rugged, arduous 6-week hunting and camping adventure in the wilds of northern Arizona and southern Utah. And our speaker, Harvey Leake, is an authority on the history of his pioneering ancestors, the Weatherwills. The, Harvey, please
Yeah,
make sure I pronounce it properly.
Weatherals.
Weatheralls of the Four Corners region. His great-grandfather, John Weatherall, guided the 1913 Roosevelt Party to Rainbow Natural Bridge just after they left the Grand Canyon region. Harvey shares his research findings in talks, books, and essays, including many articles in the online journal, The Canyon Country Zephyr. He was born and raised in Prescott, Arizona, as a retired electrical engineer. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to let Harvey have the floor and going to adjust the view of the speakers. So it's a speaker view. So once you launch the share, the floor is all yours.
Okay. Does that look okay now?
We're getting at least you, just your body. There we go. That's perfect.
Great.
I'm going to go on mute.
Okay. I'm pleased to tell this very interesting story. I think it is that maybe hasn't gotten a lot of publicity about a 15-year-old boy, Quentin Roosevelt, and his adventures in the Grand Canyon in 1913 with his famous father, Theodore Roosevelt. This trip was a culmination of Theodore's love affair with the Grand Canyon. 10 years earlier, during his first term as U.S. president, he made his famous speech, keep it as it is. Keep it for your children and children's children and all who come after you. And he was obviously quite in love with the canyon. Uh, while he was president, he made designated the Grand Canyon Game Preserve and then later established Grand Canyon National Monument. Then after his presidential term ended, he returned to the canyon in 1911. He was on his way to southern Arizona to dedicate Roosevelt Dam and made a detour up to the canyon just for a day. He took his daughter Ethel and one of his sons Archie down to the Colorado River for lunch. And then his third trip is the one I'll be talking about in 1913, which was a lot more involved trip in which they did a rim-to-rim trek and hunted for cougars up on the North Rim. So this was following his 1912 unsuccessful campaign for re-election as president under the Bull Moose Party. So he had already achieved much his notoriety and fame and been through a lot of amazing things in his life at the time he came to the canyon in 1913. He chronicled his team's adventures in 3 successive articles in the Outlook magazine. He entitled these A Cougar Hunt on the North Rim of the Grand Canyon, The Hopi Snake Dance, Across the Navajo Desert was number 2, and then The Hopi Snake Dance. And then he later compiled those 3 accounts as the first 3 chapters of this book. So starting out in the book, he described the team, the people that were with him. With me were my 2 younger sons, Archie and Quentin, aged 19 and 15 respectively. So just kids. And then a cousin of theirs, second cousin actually, Nicholas Roosevelt, who was 20 years old. He commented the youngest one of these, namely Quentin, had not before been on such a trip as that we intended to take. So Quentin was a real rookie, and his father was taking a chance in bringing him out here and subjecting him to all kinds of harsh conditions, sleeping on the ground, strenuous horseback rides and hiking around. But he felt that it was important for Quentin to have these experiences. And then a fifth member of the team was a man named Jesse Cummings of Mesa, Arizona. And he came along. He was an experienced outdoorsman, so he came along to cook, pack, and wrangle the horses. Roosevelt had given a talk previously called The Strenuous Life, and he believed that it was important that people lead strenuous lives to strengthen them and build their character. And he didn't have any concerns about Archie and Nicholas because they had had quite a bit of outdoor experience. But he said Quentin's horizon is more limited by the motor car and motorcycle. He grew up back east and lived in the White House. Um, so this was an opportunity to train Quentin if he was willing to learn the lessons. Uh, Roosevelt believed that opportunities such as this were important for developing what he called nerve control and cool-headedness. He said, by acting as if I was not afraid, I was not afraid. And so he hoped that Quentin would learn the same thing. Nicholas, 20-year-old, was an amazing guy. He and Archie had gone to school at the Evans School down in Mesa, Arizona, southern Arizona or South Central. And um, so Theodore asked Nicholas, this 20-year-old kind of kid, to take some Roosevelt horses up to the north rim of the Grand Canyon and work out all the logistics they needed for a successful cougar hunt on the North Rim. So Nicholas did go on this long horseback trip from way down in Arizona up north. He had 4 Roosevelt horses with him that they would use later in the cougar hunt. He crossed the Colorado River at Lee's Ferry, and then ended up going all the way up to Kanab, Utah. There he met with uh, the owners of what was called the Grand Canyon Transportation Company, D. Woolley and his son-in-law, David Rust. And he contracted with them to provide logistical support for this hunting trip. He also left the horses with them, and they were to meet the Roosevelt party, at the bottom of the Grand Canyon with these horses in the middle of July. And then Nicholas proceeded down to the North Rim and he explored around there. Let's see if I can get this to move. He explored around the North Rim for quite a while, met the people there, looked at the topography and the landscape, and then eventually did a north to south, rim to rim trek across the canyon, crossing the Colorado River on the cable car and climbing out to the south rim. Then the rest of the group joined them in mid-July, coming out on the train, Theodore, Archie, and Quentin. And they rendezvoused with Nicholas and arrived at the south rim of the Grand Canyon on July 13th. And that's when Quentin got his first view of the canyon. You can kind of imagine what that might have been like for somebody from the East to come out for the first time, especially a boy of his age. Maybe a little intimidating to look down there and realize that they were going to cross that. Uh, they planned their trip in 3 segments, and the cougar hunt on the North Rim was just the first segment. but they were going to spend a couple of weeks there doing that. And that correlates to Theodore's first article he wrote about the trip. And then what he called across the Navajo Desert. Uh, uh, they went on a long horseback journey off the North Rim, across the Colorado River at Lee's Ferry, and to the outpost they called K&T. Uh, uh, Today it's pronounced Kayenta pretty much, but I'm going to go with the old pronunciation, K&T. That was the home and trading post of my great-grandparents, John and Louisa Wetherill. And Theodore Roosevelt had enlisted John to take him from there beyond to Rainbow Natural Bridge. So let's see. The green line here is kind of the route. That was a 70-mile horseback trip over incredibly rugged country. And then they would return over the same route back to K&T. And that would end the second segment of their trip across the Navajo Desert. And then from there, the third segment, also a difficult horseback trip to the south down to the Hopi village of Walpi to witness the snake dance. And then from there, they would return home. So this was a 6-week venture that they were planning, and they would cover about 500 miles riding horses. So pretty amazing and strenuous what they were up to. Quentin's introduction to horsemanship had begun back in Washington when he would take rides on Archie's pet pony named Algonquin. However, long riding over steep and rocky terrain would be a new experience for him and likely somewhat scary. Theodore took him on some practice rides on the canyon rim before their long descent. Then on July 15th, they headed into the abyss. Nicholas had arranged with the Fred Harvey Company to provide mules to carry the men and their gear into the canyon's depths. Their first day's itinerary involved descending to the bottom of the canyon along the Cameron, Tonto, and Cable trails. The Cameron is what's now the Bright Angel Trail, and the Cable Trail no longer exists. It was almost a sheer drop down to the Colorado River at the cable car, which is where the Black Bridge now is. Then they intended to, later that day to follow a route up Bright Angel Creek and reach the North Rim. Before they crossed the river, they would relinquish their South Rim livestock and meet up with a man from the Grand Canyon Transportation Company who would stage himself on the north side of the cable car and winch them across. He would have another set of riding and pack animals for them to use, which included the horses that Nicholas had originally brought up to, or previously brought up to the North Rim. Well, Theodore recorded what happened when they got down to the bottom. He said, we were to have been met by our outfit with 2 men with whom we had engaged, but they didn't show up. There was no one there. The cable car was there, but there was nobody on the other side who could operate the winch. And there was no sign of their horses or supplies that were supposed to be there to meet him. Fortunately, coming down from the South Rim behind them was a rancher from the Barzee Cattle Company up on the North Rim, and very kind man, Mr. Mansfield. And Mr. Stevenson was the owner of the ranch, and Mr. Mansfield appeared on the opposite bank where he could operate the cable car. So Mansfield, an old man, the Roosevelt crew got in the cable car, and he tried to winch him across. He had quite a bit of difficulty, and they went very slow and stopped. But to make matters worse, um, a big storm came up while they were down there. Nicholas said it started to rain, and by the time we reached the river, there was a booming thunderstorm in progress. So you can kind of think of what Quentin might have felt suspended in the middle of the Colorado River in this little cage with the rain and lightning and thunder and maybe the cable car jerking and stopping, wondering if their trip would even be possible because there was still no sign of their livestock or supplies. Uh, so Nicholas recognized the man when he got close to him. He had met him on a scouting trip. And when Mr. Mansfield's boss, Mr. Stevenson, arrived at the cable car, they all helped him and his men across. And they agreed to loan the Roosevelts 2 spare horses that they had, but they urged them to stay at what was called Russ Camp, which is a predecessor of Phantom Ranch, and get a few hours sleep there before they proceeded up to the North Rim. They had a little bit of extra food, not much, so it was kind of meager. So they went to sleep there at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and there again, think about what Quentin would have felt lying on the ground at the bottom of the Grand Canyon with the looming walls and the sound of Bright Angel Creek next to him. So at 1:30 a.m. in the morning, Mansfield roused the campers. They had a little bit to eat, and Archie, Nicholas, and Jesse began walking up towards the North Rim. Quentin and his father were selected to ride the 2 spare Barzy horses. By noon, they had all reached the rim. On the cool forested plateau, they proceeded 3 or 4 miles to the Grand Canyon Transportation Company cabin. Nicholas called out to the man who had failed to meet them at the cable car. His excuses were unconvincing. The colonel fired the outfit, probably in no uncertain terms. And so they reclaimed their horses and provisions and proceeded to the cabin of Uncle Jesse Jim Owens, the esteemed elderly resident game warden. Owens graciously welcomed them, and the colonel invited him to join their hunting excursion as a guest. Wonderful old Uncle Jim, as perfect a gentleman as God ever made, supplied us with his dogs and his horses and absolutely refuses a cent, Nicholas wrote. Uh, and Uncle Jim Owens was also an accomplished cougar hunter, so he helped him a lot on that aspect of their trip. Theodore had planned this lion killing trip as a learning experience for his sons. He believed it would help them develop into the kind of men he thought they should be: masculine, aggressive, courageous, tough, and unafraid to kill. He said that hunting is a craft pursuit of value in exercising and developing hardihood of body and the virile courage and resolution which necessary lie at the base of every strong and manly character. So that's what he was thinking and taking his sons out there. Well, their hunt was partially successful. Uh, Nicholas and Archie both got a cougar, and on the subsequent day, when they were going to take Quentin out for his opportunity, his horse was lame, so he was unable to go on that and missed an opportunity to shoot one. So Theodore shot the one that Quentin would have gotten had he been there. Um, and so that was a great disappointment. So still hoping to find another opportunity for Quentin to make his own kill, the party moved their camp to a place called Cliff Spring. Maybe some of you know about it. And both Theodore and Nicholas remarked on what a beautiful place it was. Unfortunately, no more cougars were spotted, and Quentin was unable to make his kill. So that ended the time they had for hunting, and it was time to go down onto the Navajo desert. They dropped down off the Kaibab Plateau and followed the route through House Rock Valley and along the Vermilion Cliffs. Theodore got very eloquent in his description of that country. He had never been there before. He said we were going into the grim desolation of the desert, and he used some other very uh, poetic language to describe what he felt down there. I imagine Quentin felt the same. That first night, they killed a couple of rattlesnakes in their camp, so that kind of added to the sinister feeling of that place. But then the next day, they went down to Lee's Ferry and they crossed the Colorado on the ferry. And waiting on the other side were two wagons, mule teams, two guides, a cook, and supplies that the pioneer trader Lorenzo Hubble had sent out. Two of the men were Navajos. So now Quentin got a chance to experience Native Americans and observe them as they worked and helped them out going across the desert. They they felt like they were at a kind of a luxury situation now, even though all the Roosevelts were still riding horses. They had the supply wagons, but they had 150 miles to go to reach the Wetherill place at K&T. Theodore added, "We are now in the Great Navajo Reservation." So the going was not easy by any means. Nicholas says the road was the worst I've ever seen. Nothing but sand and deep sand, 25 miles of it. This photo, I, I think, is a great photo, and we're fortunate that Nicholas took many photos, and he also kept a journal. So that, in addition to Theodore's articles, tell quite a detailed story of the trip. Eventually, after several days, they journeyed on and they reached K&T, where John Wetherill, the guide and Indian trader, lives. It was kind of a rustic outpost. The building on the right is a trading post, and the building on the left is the Wetherill's house. And there wasn't much else around there other than uh, dwellings of the local Navajo Indians, mainly Navajos that lived around there. The Wetherill family consisted of John Wetherill, 46-year-old, Louisa, 35, their son, Ben, who was 16 years old, 1 year older than Quentin, and their daughter, Ida, who was called Sister, who was Quentin's age, 15. Sister was my grandmother, and I often wonder how she and her brother felt about hearing that a former president was going to come and stay at their house. I'm sure there was a bit of worry involved. What would he think of their rustic house? What would he think of them after having hobnobbed with the elite of the world? Would he even pay attention to the kids? Um, but it was probably pretty exciting too to think, and quite an honor to think that an ex-president would come and stay with them. Uh, and they didn't have anything really to worry about. Theodore said our new friends were the kindest and most hospitable of hosts. As far as their house, uh, Theodore commented on the excellent taste of its Navajo ornamentation. And Nicholas said we can call their living room and dining room two of the most beautiful rooms I've ever seen. Ben had nothing to worry about. In fact, it was recognized that being just a little older than Quentin, he could serve as a mentor to Quentin. So he was selected to go on the Rainbow Bridge portion of the trip as well. And he and Quentin hit it off well together. Ben had grown up on the frontier, spoke the Navajo language fluently, and was savvy with livestock, camping, and all sorts of outdoor challenges. As far as Sister Wetherell, my grandmother, she didn't get to go on the trip, but she was the only one in the family that had the gumption to ask the colonel to pose for her, and she took these. Uh, she she put them on the back of a postcard and sent them to her little cousin. And what she said about Theodore, I think, tells a lot about him. She said he was just like any other man. So he was obviously very kind and very attentive to the children and conversed with them and didn't hold himself out as somebody above them. John Wetherell was an experienced packer, guide, and outdoorsman, and so he provided several of his riding and pack animals that he knew could get them over the rugged 70-mile route to the bridge. Their schedule for the Rainbow Bridge portion of the trip was tight because they wanted to reach the Hopi Mesas in time to see the annual snake dance. And they heard it would take place around August 22nd. So they made quick preparations and left on the morning of August 10th. In addition to Ben, John Wetherell included in the entourage a Navajo wrangler named Gladhand and a renowned Paiute guide, Nasjabagay. Interaction with Native Americans was undoubtedly another learning experience for the young Quentin. The route um, involved backtracking a little bit to what's known as Marsh Pass and then going up Segi Canyon, where they camped the first night. Uh, the this trek is a story in itself, which I won't go into in this talk, but they went through some amazing country into and out of canyons, incredibly rugged, but incredibly beautiful. They had a second night's camp just east of Navajo Mountain and then went into some very complicated country north of Navajo Mountain before they got to Rainbow Bridge. Uh, Nicholas commented on the beauty he saw and said to describe it would be impossible, although he tried to write about it like he thought a novelist would. And I think he realized it still didn't do justice to the scenery. In some places, the route was difficult and even dangerous. This is a place where they got down off their horses, one of many places, because a spill would cause injury if it were to happen. You can see Theodore on the left uh, trying to keep his on his feet going down a very steep section. And behind him uh, were the boys, Nicholas, Quentin, and Archie, coming on down. Uh, Nicholas said it was the sort of place 2 years ago would have petrified me with the fear of falling. And I wonder what Quentin thought about it because he hadn't had the experiences that Nicholas had at that point. I've had the privilege of being able to go out here. This section of the route is no longer used. And using these photos, finding where they went, and I can attest to how beautiful and challenging it would have been to try and get horses and people over some of these places. So they went on, and eventually, as Theodore said, turned a corner, and the tremendous arch of the bridge rose in front of us. It is surely one of the wonders of the world. And if you've been there, I think you might agree. If you haven't, I would recommend going there. Nicholas says, I don't believe there's a more wonderful sight anywhere on the globe than this bridge. And I personally think he was correct. So then, after one night there and in kind of a tight schedule, they turned around and retraced their route back to K&T. They had about a day and a half to rest, and then they needed to head down to the Hopi country for the snake dance. And that was the third segment of their trip, still on horseback over some pretty challenging country. Uh, but they got there in time. Nicholas commented on the mob scene that was there. It was just teeming with people wanting to see the snake dance. But he commented that a lot of the spectators were more interested in seeing Theodore than they were the Hopi dancers. This is Quentin in the middle talking to his father. To to the left is Nicholas, and in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is John and Ben Wetherell, and behind them in the domed hat is Archie. That ended their horseback tour, and from there, the trader Lorenzo Hubble took them by automobile to his home in Ganado, and then on to Gallup, New Mexico, where they got on the train and returned to New York. I think the trip demonstrates what an amazing person Theodore Roosevelt was. Nicholas commented on the difficulties and the distances and the amount of time they were in the saddle. Considering the assumed old age of the DOG, uh, it is we who have almost died and he who grows younger every day. DOG, by the way, I think stands for Dear Old Gentleman. And he just kept going, despite the fact that he probably was a bit overweight and getting up in years, but demonstrated amazing fortitude and stamina. Nicholas says it would have been impossible to find a nicer set of people than we were thrown in with, or a more pleasant and varied set of outfits. From the very start, we had a bully time. No one complained. No one got cranky. No one got sick, and we all had a royal time. The question, though, was Theodore successful in showing Quentin the value of outdoor experiences and the rugged life? And would Quentin be willing to do any more of that kind of travel? Well, the answer is yes. Uh, Theodore wrote this letter to another brother, Kermit, and said the trip did everything for Quentin. He is as enthusiastic about it that he is planning to go back next year on his own account. Um, Quentin and Ben Wetherell planned their own boys' bear hunting trip to Colorado for the next year, maybe giving Quentin another chance to kill a big game animal. And surprisingly, Quentin's parents agreed that that would be okay. So he did come back in 1914, and the boys went on this long horseback trip from K&T into the mountains of Colorado. Unfortunately, they had a mishap in which a horse fell over and Quentin injured his back, and they didn't see any bears on the trip. But that didn't discourage Quentin. He wrote his mother and he said, but those mountains are wonderful, creeks and streams and waterfalls all over the place. And then started talking about another trip for 1915. He said, I really have had a peach of a time. And I know what kind of outfit I'm going to take next year and how much and how little there will be of it. So he and Ben were planning another hunting trip, probably to Colorado again. But the next spring, Quentin gave Ben the bad news. He says, "My family don't want me to go west this summer." His father wanted him to learn about killing of another sort, and that was warfare. And things were heating up in Europe with World War I breaking out. So um, they were going to send him to military training school that summer, so there was no way he could have come out for a hunting trip. Um, so anyway, regardless of that, his enthusiasm for the rugged outdoors is a testament to the success of the colonel's influence on him. Most notably, he exposed Quentin to many thrilling encounters with wild nature that made the young man long for more. No doubt Quentin would have embarked on many other outdoor adventures if he'd lived long enough to do so. World War I was already underway when President Wilson decided that the United States should enter the conflict. Theodore expected all of his sons to enlist. Quentin agreed to do so, dropping out of Harvard in his sophomore year. He joined the Army Air Corps, learned to fly, and early in 1918 was sent to France, where he would join the fight. On July 10th, 1918, Quentin shot down his first German plane. 4 days later, he was shot down and killed. He was 20 years old. When the colonel heard the news, he was devastated. He never got over the loss, and his health, which was already poor, continued to fail. Since Quentin's death, the world seems to have shut down upon me, he wrote. Uh, Dispirited, he died on January 16th, 1919, at the age of 60, less than half a year after he lost his beloved Quentin. So that's the sad ending of, I think, a pretty dramatic and epic story about Quentin Roosevelt and his outdoor experiences, beginning with the Grand Canyon. Thank you.
Thank you, Harvey. That was a wonderful presentation and tremendous photographs and use of the Nicholas Roosevelt book. I'm going to start reading off the comments to you. So anyone that has questions or comments, please enter them in the chat. Or if you would like to unmute, you can ask the questions directly. So Harvey, we'll get a file of all the comments and we'll send that to you because a lot of them are accolades and thank yous.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
A question. Who's doing that?
Yep. Go ahead.
Who's doing that? Oh. You showed that photo of them drinking out of a water pocket. Do you know where that was taken?
I've never found that particular location. We have found the second campsite on the way to Rainbow Bridge, and there is a water pocket there, but it looked quite the same.
Oh, so
that
it's in a slick rock out there. Okay.
Yeah, that would be a neat quest to go try and find that.
I guess in those days they didn't worry too much about Giardia and cysts and other protozoas.
I guess not. Interestingly, they also didn't worry about having Secret Service people along.
True. Harvey, Peter Corbett has a question or just a comment. It appears Governor Hunt is in the photo from Walpi on the middle in the left.
Yeah, that's correct. That was the first Arizona governor after it became a state, Governor George W.P. Hunt. And there were probably other notable people there in that photo that I didn't call out.
Randy asked the question, are there any remnants of the Wetherill trading post still around?
No, unfortunately, that's all been torn down now.
Okay. So Ben was your great uncle, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
All
Hi,
right, everyone,
Harvey.
any other comments or questions, anyone? This is your chance.
Hi, Harvey. Tom from Fairbanks, Alaska.
Oh, Tom, hi. Good to hear
Hi.
you.
Hey, good to see you. Um, hey, I got a question for you. So, on their trip to Rainbow Ridge, I noticed on the map, Keat Seal. Did they have a chance to see any native ruins, like Keat Seal or anything similar along the way that you know of?
That's a very interesting question. My great grandfather did take the group to Batatacan cliff dwelling, which this was right at the start of the trip on their first day out of Kayente, and they were both part of Navajo National Monument at the time, still are, and so they seemed to enjoy seeing Batatacan. But then John Wetherill offered to take them to Keat Seal. And he said that Theodore Roosevelt said, I'm not so much interested in the past, I'm interested in the future. So he declined to go there.
Okay. Interesting. Hey, thank you so much, Harvey, for sharing.
Yeah, sure, Tom.
Harvey, a comment from Peter Corbett. Just it seems odd that to have started the trip in the heat of July. Do you have
Um,
any insights into why they chose the middle of summer?
no, I think the boys were out of school and um, I don't really know. They didn't really explain it, but it does get pretty hot
That's
in that
that's
country.
logical.
Yeah,
They were in school, so they could only have the 3 months.
yeah. By the way, this trip was just about 6 months before Theodore Roosevelt went on his River of Doubt trip in Brazil. And I think another reason for doing it was for him to maybe get in shape a little bit for that trip. That was quite a dramatic and dangerous trip in which he lost his health and almost died. And if you haven't read about it, it's an amazing story. So to put it in context, he was taking his two youngest boys out before he would be doing that trip with his older son, Kermit.
Did did Kermit also serve in the First World War?
Yes,
Yeah.
there was Theodore Jr., Kermit, Archie, and
Mhm.
Quentin. They all served in the war.
Kim Christensen uh, has a question. Great story, thank you. Was there any evidence that the Roosevelts ever stayed in the cabin near Powell Plateau?
Um, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Uh, I'm not, I don't think the cabin was even there at the time. And I don't have any evidence that they went down off of Swamp Point to where that cabin is. Uh, we have Nicholas's journal of the hunting trip, but they don't mention going out towards the Powell Plateau or any of that country. There's also a myth that Teddy Roosevelt liked to hunt up on the North Rim as if he did it several times. Well, he didn't do it several times. It was just that one time. So
Okay.
I don't think there's any connection of Roosevelt with that cabin. And there were not multiple trips that he made out there. Uh, a fortunate thing in researching Roosevelt, his comings and goings are very well documented in newspaper articles and letters. There are archives full of letters. So we're pretty sure we know when and where he went places.
So we have a compliment from Jenny B. What a great story. Thank you. And again, I'll send you these comments in a little, it'll be a little chat file. Karen,
Okay.
Karen Gregg has a comment or a question. Is the rug behind you from the trading post? Is that an heirloom?
Oh, they they had rugs like this, but this is one that I acquired. I do have some of the Wetherells
Okay.
rugs, and a lot of them have disappeared, but their house, as you saw in the photos, was kind of like a museum.
Davy Crockett has made a comment. He said, I noticed a new report that stated he was going to hide himself, and quote, hide himself from the public view for 2 months in the Grand Canyon beyond the reach of reporters and out of touch with the wires. This is, of course, referring to TR.
Uh,
He wanted to escape publicity.
yeah, he asked the people involved to not talk too much about it, but obviously when they went down to the Colorado River to try and cross on the cable car and ran into the storm, that was picked up by the news wires that they were
I
hanging in
saw
it.
that. Yeah.
But I think that's about the last time that the trip was written about. So the reporters never got beyond that.
Those are metal cages, so a lightning storm would be extremely dangerous.
Right. It would definitely be scary.
Peter Corbett also asks, is there a good book on the Wetheralls?
Uh, yeah, there's several good ones, actually, depending on what aspect about them.
Okay.
The classic one was published in 1934, and
Okay.
it's called Traitors to the Navajos. And I would highly recommend that one as kind of introduction. That's for John and Louisa Wetherell. There was an extended Wetherell family. John was one of 5 brothers, and they all had interesting lives, and a lot has been written about the bigger family. But if you want to focus on John and Louisa, check out Traitors to the Navajos. And I'll just add, my great-grandmother Louisa taught Theodore a lot about Indian culture. She was quite a student. She loved the Navajos, and they loved her. And she had spent a lot of time researching them. So Theodore actually published 2 of her Navajo poems that she had translated in his article and book. And he said that she was an amazing person.
We have a question from Helen F. Where are the photographs archived? It was an amazing collection of photos that you showed.
There is an amazing collection. So I think almost all of these were Nicholas Roosevelt photos. A few of them were probably John Wetherell photos.
Okay.
And Nicholas's main collection is at Syracuse University, including his journals and photos. But he also donated a set of photos to the Grand Canyon. So they have quite a good representation of his photos at the Grand Canyon Archive. And then in my own personal Wetherell archive, I have others that Nicholas had given to the Wetherells.
Fantastic. And I guess we can read more about your work and your historical research in the Zephyr you're published in that. It's an online newsletter, right?
It's called the Canyon Country Zephyr.
Canyon Country
And
Zephyr.
just Google Harvey Leake Canyon Country Zephyr.
Okay.
It'll give you a whole list of articles. There are about 30 of them or so.
Fantastic. Well, with that, Harvey, we're gonna thank you for a great virtual outing this evening, and look forward to your next one. We don't forget anyone that gives a virtual outing. We continually go back to the same people because
Okay.
you have so much to present. I'm going to thank everyone for attending this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I appreciate you inviting me. It's been quite a lot of fun. I enjoy sharing this with people.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll